What's up guys, Justin here with TheSketchUpEssentials.com. So in today's video, we're going to talk about how you can go start to finish taking a model from SketchUp to layout to create plans. Let's go ahead and just jump into it. And so in this video, I'm going to go pretty fast. If you want more in-depth instruction on this, make sure you check out my course, which is on sale through end of this week. That gives you really kind of a good step-by-step walkthrough of this. But in this case, we're going to bring in this Model Cercier 70 by SD from the 3D warehouse. So you can find this and follow along. And what I want to do is I'm going to download this into my SketchUp model. Now, a lot of the time you're going to do your own modeling, but I think this is probably going to be a decent model for us to start off with. And if we have problems, we can work through them on this video. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start by bringing this in right here. And it doesn't really need to be aligned with your model origin. So I think we're probably okay. And I'm going to go ahead and move my default model out of the way like this. And so I like to start off by creating just kind of a regular working view, because that working view is going to give me something I can come back to a little bit later on. But what we need to do to take this over into layout and create a floor plan is we need to create a floor plan view. And so to do that, we're going to take a section plane across the house. So we're going to come over here, click on section plane. I'm going to tap the up arrow key to lock this up and down, and this is going to take that section cut across the house. And we can go ahead and we can name this floor plan and hit OK. And so what we've done is we've taken a section cut across this house. And so you want to take a look at this, because what you're doing is you're basically using this section cut to see where things like openings in your walls are, other things like that, as well as you may want to look at things like your furniture or your appliances over here, just to see if this cut is where you want it to be. And then you can use the move tool to adjust this up and down. So usually I don't like to go so low that I'm getting cuts through like the furniture. I like to do something where I'm comfortably able to see things like sinks and other things like that. We might see, the problem is the refrigerator is going to be as tall as the doors. So we're just going to be okay with this taking a cut through our appliances over here. But we've created this first view, and what we want to do is we want to go into a top-down view. That's going to give us our floor plan view that we're going to send to layout. Now, one thing we need to do is we need to go into our view or our camera and click on parallel projection. That's going to give us a straight up and down view into our model. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come and zoom in here until I can see everything that I want to see. And then I'm going to add a scene. And so by adding a scene, what we're going to do, and we're going to go ahead and we'll save this as a new style. But by adding a scene, what we're doing is we now have a view that we can quickly go back to, but we can also reference it in layout. Now, before I send this over to layout, I want to adjust the style with a few different things. So to do that, we want to go over into the styles section of our tray. So we're going to go into styles right here. Note that you use styles in order to set the way that this model looks. And you can use this to set your model to be color, black and white, whatever. But in this case, we're going to select a style, and we're going to use a default style as a building block. So we're going to click on default styles right here. And in this case, I'm going to jump into the hidden line style. Notice how when I jump into the hidden line style right here, what it does is it selects a style where our edges are set to be a certain way, our textures are set to be a certain way. Everything about the way the model looks is controlled by this style. So in this case, there's a couple things I want to do. The first is I don't necessarily want all of these fills in my walls. So I'm going to go into my advanced settings or my modeling settings under edit right here. We're going to uncheck the box for section fills. I don't want section fills in here filling in the walls. And then we're also going to adjust our section line width, because you can see how right now that section line is basically being generated anywhere in here where that section plane intersects with our model. And it's a little heavy for me. So I'm going to bring it down to like 2 right here. And so notice what that did is that brought the size of this model, or the size of the section line right here, to be a little bit thinner. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back to my previous camera view by going to camera previous, and I'm going to click on that twice. I may bring this section line width down even more like this. But notice how I've made changes to this style. Well, I want to make sure that I update this style with changes by clicking on the button right here. I also want to right click and I want to make sure that I update this scene so that it has the style applied to it. Notice how now if I click back into the scene, this is really quickly going to give me my floor plan view. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to come in here and I want to go into my edges and I want to add profiles, because notice how in some cases, like right here, for example, we're not actually seeing things like the pillows. We're not seeing the toilet in here. Well, if we check the box for profiles, notice how that geometry is going to show up. And then I'm just going to click on this scene 2 right here in order to get back into this view. And so I think we're in pretty good shape with this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call it floor plan. And I'm going to save my model. Okay, and so now I think that we're ready to start taking our model over into layout. But before we do that, quick reminder that the SketchUp Essentials course is currently on sale through the end of the week. If you want some more in-depth instruction on this workflow and for other things modeling in SketchUp, then also creating plans and layout, make sure you go check out the SketchUp Essentials course. I designed this to be a start to finish training that gives you the ability not only to learn what you need, but also get the help that you need with our live calls in our community forum. So if you are looking to take your SketchUp game to the next level, make sure you check out the course at thesketchupessentials.com/course. But now let's go ahead and let's take our floor plan and send it over to layout. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to do a file and we're going to click on the option for send to layout. Alternatively, you can just open up layout as well. What we want to do is just do a file, send to layout. And when we do that, it's going to open up layout and it's going to ask us to pick a template. Now, I have title block templates created under my templates right here. So I have different floor plan sheets right here. You can also just pick one of the title block plans that's already in here and you can just adjust that to meet your needs. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and pick my sheet, but you don't have to do that. And so what that's going to do is that's going to bring in this SketchUp model and place it as a viewport in our layout document. Now, one thing about that, notice how it's red at the moment. That's because it got brought in on a layer that is designed to be a repeating layer, right? So when you want to repeat your title block, for example, you put them on a repeating layer. We don't necessarily want that. We want to add a new layer. I'm going to bring it up to the top for right now. And I'm just going to call this SketchUp viewport. And I always recommend that you put your SketchUp viewport on its own layer. So we've created this viewport, we've created this layer, but what I want to do is I want to come over here on this viewport, right click, and I want to move this to the SketchUp viewport layer. Notice how it turns blue because it's no longer on a repeating layer. But basically what we've done is we've brought in a viewport into our model that we can now work with. Now what I want to do is I want to start by going into the SketchUp model section right here and setting an actual scale. So at the moment, this is in here is just kind of a random scale down below. I'm going to find something close, like maybe 3/4 of an inch right here, or we may go with something a little bit smaller so we would have room for notes. So we might do a 1/2 inch equals 1 foot right here. But notice how I can click and drag this viewport around right here. Note that if you want to resize this viewport, make sure that you've checked the box for preserve scale before you do that. But now I can mouse over these grips and I can click and drag in order to adjust my viewport size in here so that it's close to my building footprint. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to lock all of these layers right here. So, and we're gonna pick one layer that isn't locked, which I'm just gonna make the default layer for right now. But notice how when we do that, what's happening is now I can't accidentally click and drag any of this stuff. It's kind of fixed. And if I ever need to move my viewport layer around, I can just unlock it in order to do that. But now what I want to do is I want to start by setting this to a mode where I don't have broken lines in here. So to do that, I'm going to click on my viewport and go into my SketchUp model right here. This is currently set to raster, which is the fastest viewport you can have in SketchUp, but it doesn't necessarily do well with line weights. So I am going to put this on hybrid mode, but note that hybrid mode on a heavy model can be very performance intensive. So there are some things you can do about this, which I talk about in the course, but we're not going to worry about them too much for right now. But notice how now I've got like these smooth lines in here, like this. So then I'm going to lock the SketchUp viewport, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start dimensioning it. And so I like to put my dimensions on a layer. So I'm just going to add a layer. I'm going to call it dimensions. And so I like to do that because that means I can select everything and adjust the style a little bit later on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start dimensioning this out. And in this case, I don't necessarily like the units that are in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my dimension style and I'm going to adjust this to architectural inches right here. But we're just going to draw another dimension like this. And again, these are coming in meters. So really what I need to do is go into my document setup and adjust my units to fractional inches. We're going to set our precision to a 16th right here. But then this one, because it's already been drawn, needs to be changed to architectural right here. But we can use this and notice how they're snapping in here. And I don't know why these units are continuing to come in here in meters, but that's okay. We can fix them all in a second. But I'm just going to add dimensions to kind of like the middle of the mullion here, like this. And so notice how I've got these dimensions on this side of the house right here. Well, one of the reasons that I put all of my dimensions on one layer is so that I can adjust them all at once. So for example, I want all of the fonts to be bigger. So to do that, what I can do is I can right click on the layer that these are on. I can click on select entities and notice how it's going to select them all. Well, now I can set them all to architectural inches with one click. I can also change the text style on these with one click. So notice how I can bring these up like this just by adjusting the style, and notice how they are all in here at once. And so you do want to pay a little bit of attention to the close ones over here, but I can use this in order to quickly make those adjustments. And if I ever decided, for example, that I wanted to adjust the font of the dimensions, what I could do is I could select those entities, then go into my text style right here. I could just pick a new font. And in this case, I actually have a scrapbook with different fonts in it. And I created a video about scrapbooks, which I will link to in the notes down below. But notice how this has fonts in here that I like. Well, I can sample them. So say I wanted to use this Newton font right here. I could apply this, but you do want to make sure that you have that whole layer selected before you do that. So we're going to do select entities, then sample right here, and we're good to go. And then we can adjust that font style so that this font is smaller like this. But now I have dimensions on my plan. And so when I'm not working on the dimensions layer, I like to lock it. But then I'm going to add some other notes, like a sheet name. So to do that, I'm going to use scrapbooks again. So we're going to go to our layers right here. And in this case, I'm just going to call this notes. And notice how I'm putting all of these on their own layer, right? So my notes are going to go on their own layer. My dimensions are going to go on their own layer. That just makes editing them and also like toggling them on and off if I don't need them a lot easier. But in this case, we're going to go into our scrapbooks, and you should actually have some title blocks built in from SketchUp. And so there's a number of different title blocks and other notes in here that you can pick from, or you could also create your own. But in this case, I'm going to probably go with this elegant scrapbook. But I'm going to click and drag this in right here. And this is going to be my sheet name. And now you can make this bigger if you want to, but just know that because of the way this is all kind of grouped, you may have to make some adjustments in here. But we're just going to call this floor plan. We're going to put in our scale, and this has a named value for scale, but I have not been able to access that in here. So we're just going to go back into our SketchUp model section on our viewport. You may have to unlock your layer in order to do this, but just check our scale, which is a 1/2 inch equals 1 foot. So now I'm going to go back over here, and we're just going to put this in here like this. And so again, what we can do is we can go into our scrapbook if you have it, or you can just pick a font. But I'm using my fonts right here, but you can pick that. You can apply this in here, but then one thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you adjust that text style so that everything kind of fits. So you might have to make some adjustments in here with your scrapbook. Ideally, you're going to create these scrapbooks in a way that you can, in a way that they're already kind of set up with the fonts that you like. But in this situation, I'm just going to resize these text boxes. And so I don't know why these are a little bit weird. So I'm just going to right click on them and explode them. And then they should work just fine. But I just want to make sure that I've sized this up enough that the box is big enough for us to actually see the text that's in the box, like this. And so creating these is pretty easy once you kind of understand the way that you're using the views in SketchUp to set the way that your pages look. Creating new pages is actually pretty easy. You can just go into the pages section right here. I'm going to double click on this and I'm going to label it floor plan, but then I'm going to add another page and we're going to call it elevations. And so for elevations, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to I'm going to jump back into SketchUp right here, and I'm going to create a couple views for elevations. So we can go back into this scene one right here, but we're going to go into a front view, toggle our camera to parallel projection like this. We're going to add a scene. We'll go into a side view, do the same thing. And so we've got these scenes kind of set up. Now, one thing about this though is note that I forgot to make them black and white. And you don't have to make them black and white, by the way, but in this case, I'm going to, and we can go ahead and we can zoom in, right click to update this scene and be good to go. But what we want to do is we want to adjust this right here so that it's got kind of the look that we want. Now the hidden line style in this case is not my favorite, just because you can't really see much about your building. So a lot of the time what I'll do is I'll do a shaded with textures style that's still black and white from a background standpoint, but this will actually show the textures. But one thing I like to do in a scene like this is I like to add shadows. So I like to toggle into the shadows section right here, because what you can do is you can use the shadows in order to generate a little bit of depth. And in this case, it's not doing a ton of that, but even a little bit just gives you kind of an idea that this is going to be kind of overhanging. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to update this scene. Now what I don't want to do is go between these different scenes and update all of them at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the scene section in my tray. I'm going to click on this scene, but then do a shift click and select the others as well. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to click on the option to update scenes. And in this case, I want to uncheck, and this is really important, uncheck everything but style and fog and click on update. So when I do that, it's going to go through and it's going to update every one of these scenes to have the same style like this. And then you might come into each one of these scenes and maybe toggle your shadows on and kind of adjust those shadows and then update them. So they can each have their own shadow settings in here. And you don't have to do the shadows. I just like the way that they add a little bit of depth to your image. But now we've updated these. We've got 4 scenes that are kind of showing us our scenes with shadows. And this would be the dark side of the house, so it might be better to just not do shadows on this one. But now what I can do is I can do a file, save, and then over in layout, what I can do is I can insert or copy a viewport. So in this case, I could take this viewport, which is my SketchUp viewport, I can copy it, and then I can go into my elevations page and I can click on paste. And so what that's going to do is that's going to paste this viewport onto this page. And in this situation, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I've placed that on my SketchUp viewport layer right here, but then I want to right click on this one and I want to pick a different view or a different scene. And notice how if I right click on this right now, it's not actually seeing the most recent version. That's because after you make a change to your SketchUp model, you need to make sure that you save that SketchUp model. And so what we need to do is we need to either right click and click on the option for update model reference, or we need to go back to our document setup in our references, and notice how this is showing us that this is out of date. We need to update this model right here. And so when we do that, what that's going to do is that's going to give us the ability to access our other scenes. So in this case, scene 3 right here is going to be an exterior elevation. And so for our elevations, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the scale a little bit smaller so that we can fit multiple copies of this on one page. But then I'm just going to resize my viewport right here. And I'm going to drag this viewport up here. Well, I can hold the control key and drag in order to duplicate this. So I'm going to duplicate this viewport, and for this viewport, I'm going to set it to my last scene right here. Then I'm going to hold the control key and drag this one over. I'm going to set this to my scene 5 right here. And you can also use the keys on your keyboard in order to nudge these left and right. Then this one, I'm going to hold control and drag it up, and I'll set this one to my scene 4 right here. But notice how we can use this in order to really quickly, and so we're able to use this to quickly create elevations, which we could then come in here and start dimensioning and adding notes and other things like that. All right, so that is a very fast run through of how you can go from SketchUp to layout. If you want to get a lot more in depth, make sure you check out my course, which is on sale through the end of the week. I'll link to that on this page, or you can just visit TheSketchUpEssentials.com/course. If you have any questions about anything we talked about, feel free to leave them down below. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.